of the Transport Committee. We've got Fiona Abbott here as well, and our regional councillor, who you all should know, Penny Gaylor. So welcome to our space today. We're looking forward to this briefing and getting a bit of an update, and I'm sure the team are going to have some questions for you at the end, unless you've got moments where you want to invite questions in the middle of it. I'll leave that up to you, how you determine when we bring questions. All right, I'll hand it over to you.
Morena, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if that's picking up. Please feel free to ask questions during the presentation. We're all quite, between the three of us, hopefully we'll be able to answer any questions you have. So today we're going to go through a bit of an overview, just a bit of an update on the network, workforce planning initiatives that we've got going on, some other updates, some key infrastructure updates. You'll notice there's a bit of construction going on around here, other key initiatives that we're working on, and some aspects of the public transport operating model and the sustainable public transport framework that is now currently underway, and a review of the future requirements. So the Metlink network, a couple of points to note here. The region's public transport patronage is growing. We are currently about 96% of pre-COVID levels, so our original thoughts we would return to pre-COVID levels by 2025. That's looking extraordinarily accelerated at this point. 38.6 million trips per annum, and continuing to grow to 50.6 million by 2030. So in respect of that growth, we're looking at upgrading and improving the resilience of the rail corridors, increasing bus priority along core routes, increasing fleet number and vehicle capacity across bus and rail network, improving the facilities and accessibility at stations and stops and to the information systems, working with operators to restore staff numbers. We've got some clear objectives. Our network is designed around the needs of our community, our customers, and the policy aims of the national and regional public transport plans. We do know that demand for PT is growing, and we hope it grows even more, even with the changes in travel patterns around post-COVID. And our patronage is, as I said, expected to return to pre-COVID levels by 2025, and we're looking at that being probably earlier. Growth, we're thinking, will be driven by latent demand, and we tap into this through the provision of more capacity, frequency, and improved customer experience. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about the plans for the rail network. So this slide is just a little bit of an overview of our Kapiti network. So we've got about 10 bus services. We have a rail service, and our patronage, as you can see, is generally increasing there from the graphs. Please feel free to ask any questions as we go through. So just a little bit of update on workforce planning. Yes, driver shortages are a nationwide issue, and Metlink has, of course, been impacted by this driver shortage. We estimate to operate our full network as it is 675 bus drivers are required, and so we're 87 bus drivers short of a full establishment. We're also experiencing staff issues on the rail network, and obviously this is continuing to affect our reliability. Fortunately, we don't believe driver shortages are affecting our Kapiti network. So,
are you not paying them enough? I mean, no, it's a basic question. But bus drivers, given the job that they have to do, are I think criminally underpaid. I'm just wondering, has that, and someone's got to pay the bill, obviously. But is that a consideration, do you think?
Yes, so as you can see, what we have done is we have funded wage increases from the 1st of April. So we've lifted the hourly rate to $30 per hour for urban bus drivers and 28 in the regions. It's important to remember that Metlink has contracted operators to operate our public transport network. So Metlink technically doesn't pay the bus drivers, that would be the operators. So we've needed central government support to require them to be paid a living wage, which we've lobbied really, really hard to do. So you're quite right, those terms and conditions in particular, the salaries are really, really important.
Just to jump in and say that, morning everyone, we did take the first step as Metlink before the nationwide lift in salaries and wages for bus drivers went up. So we unilaterally put bus driver wages up because we had recognised that, and we're happy that the government has come in behind us on that. But as Fiona said, the conditions are important too. So things like split shifts and making sure there are rest stops and toilets and facilities. Those are probably now that's more of an issue than pay. So improving those things is high on our agenda as well. 2 million for what we put in for the bus driver wages increase.
Just as an example, that's what we've done above and beyond recognising that.
I just that you've still got 87 bus drivers short, right? Which is making all of the other hamsters run faster on the wheel for the same amount of money. So in terms of fixing that problem, what's the plan? Because you can say we've raised it to $30, but for a bus driver in an incredibly stressful job, which it is, $30 an hour, it's not a massive incentive for somebody to go, gee, I really want to be a bus driver.
No, we totally understand the difficulty of being a bus driver, especially in Wellington City where there's congested roads and so on and so forth. But no, actually there are more bus drivers now in the recruitment training pipeline for the two main operators, Transurban and NZ Bus, than we need for the full establishment. So, and in fact for NZ Bus, they don't have a driver shortage anymore. They have more drivers than they need, and their cancellations have disappeared on NZ Bus routes. So if you're lucky enough to live in a NZ Bus route in Wellington City, you're not experiencing cancellations anymore, thankfully, which is well ahead of when we thought that would be the case. For Transurban, they're still a bit further behind in terms of getting that workforce up and getting those cancellations down. But we are reasonably confident now that by September time, we should have that full complement of drivers on the Wellington City bus network and indeed around the region. And as a result, we will get those cancellations right down. So.
And there's never been any shortage, in Kapiti because we've used a bus, separate company again. I don't recall ever having anything cancelled because of bus driver shortage.
No, use the bus as before, and we'll show that in a couple of slides. I think just to that point, so we have obviously funded wage increases, so that's a good question. We've had to lobby government for changes to immigration rules. As you would appreciate, coming off the back of COVID, it was incredibly difficult to recruit, so we've had to put a lot of work into making it easier to recruit overseas drivers. We've leaned into the driver conditions, reducing split shifts and improving facilities, in particular toilet facilities, for example, on the network in Wellington. We've temporarily suspended shifts to reduce unplanned cancellations, so that's how we've responded to that, and created some prioritisation to try and ensure school, consecutive and peak trips aren't disproportionately impacted where we can do so.
Can I just ask a question about training of drivers, particularly given that we're going to bring international drivers over? What sort of training will you be giving, or will the companies be giving them?
Yeah, good question. My understanding from NZ Bus is that a lot of their drivers have come from the Philippines, and they have quite a rigorous training schedule that they're undertaking with them. So it will be on-the-job training, but they won't be let loose on the network without having received the full training. I think they've got to have a Class 4 licence to be able to drive buses.
What about in terms of local knowledge? Because the bus drivers have a lot of local knowledge, and so anybody will, approach and say, is this the right bus to get on for going to this location? How is that type of information going to be covered in the training?
I think the reality is that just builds up over time. And we also expect that for international bus drivers coming in, it'll just take some time. And there will be some teething problems, we imagine. But there
will be teething problems. So
I think so, yeah.
In Birmingham, where we had the similar issue a couple of decades ago, the European Union opened up the borders to allow people across. That was exactly what happened. Huge numbers of non-local people and total chaos. I think some more research into that.
We're not
Because that will
expecting
create
total
another
chaos.
lot. I'm all about getting rid of unintended consequences. So yeah, if that could be looked at, please.
Yep, thank you.
On that is we've had the operators in talking to us in the council chambers, and what I've been impressed with is that their whole approach to wrapping around them as new employees above and beyond what they would do for anybody who's just come through and lives in Karori, that they're welcoming them at the airport and they're just making sure that they've got places to live, they've got gear to set themselves up in a new country, so it's to me all part of their understanding of that this is a bit different from a local employee who would know the patch.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for coming along today. This is mine's a general question. I'm just wondering if this presentation is going to be shared on our hubs, because there's a lot of detail in it.
Yes, it will.
Okay, thank you. I might have further questions later. Thank you.
I'll try not to go through the detail in the slides so that we can.
Someone, I think the microphone's-
Kia ora. Simon Black. Hey, just on to the employees and the international versus local. Is it just the international a solitary person, or is it their families? And in this housing crisis, how are we coping with their accommodation? And why are we not getting New Zealand employees? Just a question around those.
I'm happy to take that. Yeah, so it has been a challenge to recruit. It's a very tight labour market in New Zealand, as I'm sure people who work in other sectors will appreciate. So there just weren't any people applying. Now the domestic recruitment pipeline has picked up a bit, and we're seeing a little bit of a tick up, and obviously that's great as well. The question about housing is a very serious one, and I think that's the same for anybody coming in. I think as Penny was saying, a few weeks of accommodation have been provided free by the operators for new drivers coming in, but after that they're on their own, like any other migrant would be coming into any other job in any other city in New Zealand. But we do recognise that it is a challenge. There's only so much we can do. So that's maybe not an adequate answer, but that's what it is.
I was just asking that question off the back of Councillor Wilson's. Are we not paying our New Zealanders enough to live in our country, and relying on migrants to come in? And are we separating them from their homes and families?
Well, I think what we've lobbied the government to do is to provide a residency pathway. So if international people want to come and get a job in New Zealand and work here and contribute, then we fully support that.
Thank you.
So a little bit on our operators. We have NZ Bus. They have recruited nearly 100 drivers from overseas to exceed their driver shortfall, and they have managed to minimise their cancellations. So they're now within our expected performance. Transurban is actively building their driver numbers. They're a little bit behind, but we're hoping for a significant improvement to their performance by September. And Transdev is also increasing the frequency of training schools and including a train manager training module for passenger operators that enables coverage for fulfilling the role of train manager in case of staff absence. So, we're taking our operators are taking quite a few actions to try and ameliorate the impact of staff absences due to COVID or for labour shortages. As Penny said, user bus is not currently affected by driver shortage and actually provides the network's best reliability for their customers. So this here just in terms of Kapiti Bus network performance, this gives you a bit of a slide of that. Again, user bus has the highest performance of the network with no cancelled trips in May and a higher level of reliability and punctuality. So congratulations, Kapiti Coast. This slide here talks about the review actions Otaki Route 290. In July, we introduced a new Otaki timetable with more commuter and off-peak travel options, and that includes earlier and later services as well as doubling the weekend frequency. The Route 290 has seen a 94% increase in patronage since July 2022 compared with the same period in previous years. So, in respect of, we're investigating with Horizons the opportunity to divert 291 for possible new service to Peka Peka Beach and Te Horo. And following on from the Tawa On Demand trial, we will look at whether On Demand could be an appropriate service option for some of the Kapiti local services.
Yeah, Bernie, did you have a...
Yep. It's about the bus network, previous couple of slides. Thomas, I appreciate a reply from you. Myself and other elected members have in the past written to the Greater Wellington Regional Council asking for bus shelters, particularly for older people and also for school children. Yeah. Now, specifically, I have mentioned 2 specific sites down at Paraparaumu by the school there, Kena School, a bus shelter there for children. And I have been getting fogged off between the council, KCDC, and the regional council. And the last time we had anyone who actually did some work was Nigel Wilson. He actually got some bus shelters for us. But I have found, I have received letters from Councillor Gaylor, and I received letters from the council, and they're looking at finding the resident objects to a bus shelter close to the Kena School, so they're looking at moving it back. But it just goes back and forth. This is over 3 or 4 years, and it hasn't been resolved. And I just wondered your view on that, please.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are, excuse me, a lot of demands for bus shelters around the network, way more than we can deliver in one go. We do have a plan for bus shelters as well as other facilities across the whole bus and rail network in the whole region, and we are working through them and prioritising them. Fiona knows about that as our infrastructure SAR, so I don't know if you want to talk a bit about how that prioritisation works.
Yes.
And how we can respond to residents and community requests for bus shelters.
Yep, so look, it is a tricky one, because with respect to bus shelters, we have a patronage threshold, I guess, where certain patronage has certain amenities. So when you've got low patronage, the prioritisation for a shelter would not be there versus high patronage, and that's just a way of, I guess, triaging cost and amenity throughout the network. Not every single bus stop gets a shelter. So that's a fact, and we can always review that. But at the moment, when we've got something like 3,500, 4,000 shelters on the network, and there are a number of people who have higher patronage that need shelters ahead of. So prioritisation is a fact of life, I'm afraid. That just is how it is.
We can make sure you get. We'll make sure you get a response.
Yes, exactly. So we can definitely respond if we know the locations and give you the lowdown on that one. Absolutely.
Yep. Yes, please. Yep.
Yep. No, we will undertake to respond to you.
Can I, just to follow up on that, it might be helpful for us to know there's a cost, quite a substantial cost to putting a bus shelter in place, right? And then the OPEX that runs off that of maintenance and cleaning and vandalism.
Yeah,
Can you give us an idea of how much a bus shelter costs?
Off the
That's
top of my
probably
head,
way too specific.
that depends on the bus shelter. So I won't talk about the one that's going in Paraparaumu with the living roof. That's a little bit more of a costly one. But
just a standard basic
yeah, maybe
bus shelter.
$25,000, $30,000.
Okay.
But then you've got maintenance, and look, there are some other issues around putting shelters where none exists, and they relate to, as you've rightly pointed out, the amount of consultation that is done to put in one shelter is quite significant, and there is a lot of where you can place shelters depends on whether there's sufficient space on the sidewalk, whether it's adjacent to somebody's house. A lot of people don't like bus shelters close to their properties. If you are putting in a shelter where there's no money, you've got to go through the resource consent process. So we have a lot of shelters that we have to put in where patronage is higher and people need shelters in many areas, and those are the ones that take the priority because the process is quite a significant process to go through, if that makes sense. So yes, there is a portfolio of money that we have for installing new shelters and renewing old shelters. When we renew old shelters, we also have to look at the footprint of that shelter, and sometimes we need to add space. And when we add space, that again goes through the resource consent process and the community consultation process. So it's not as simple as just rocking up and putting a shelter. There is quite a significant process to go through.
Penny will add something as well.
Fiona, a heads up that maybe if you could, I don't know if you know off the top of your head, what are the number of bus stops that don't have a shelter, and therefore that's the scale of the issue we're dealing with. But I just add to Fiona's comments around the very involved process. What we have in my time and my observation included in that really important process in the Kapiti Coast, for example in Otaki and in Waikanai, is involved the respective community boards, and they have been really helpful that in both occasions when we've been changing routes and trying to change some bus stops, we have had people, the resident not wanting to have a new bus stop outside their home, and so we've had to it go through quite the process with the Otaki Community Board and the Waikanai Community Board, which actually was really helpful, but it also was a vehicle for the community to kind of air and share and us to kind of collaboratively get to as best possible solution.
And no, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's thousands. It's thousands, yes.
Okay, we've got quite a few lined up for questions, so let's jump into those. I'll start with Councillor Coe.
Right, thank you. As a resident of Te Horo Beach, I can't let this slide go by without saying something. In our community at the beach, there are a number of long-term residents who now find themselves unable to drive or are concerned about climate change or can't afford to run a car, whatever. And it's extremely frustrating for them seeing the Otaki bus whiz by. My plea to you is, can we please get some comms around this in terms of some possible timelines or an update on the process? I'm happy to take the role of keeping people informed, and there's other people in the room here who would also take on that role. We just need to let them know that something is happening and what's happening and when they might expect to see some outcomes from this process, because it's doing their heads in, some of them, yes, it's not a good look for Greater Wellington or for anybody involved in the transport sector with how it's being handled at the moment. So
yes.
Okay, so what's the next step in terms of progressing that?
You've asked for comms and you've asked for clarity. I'll go back and see if we can get you that.
That'd be great. Thank you very much.
Great. Councillor Hanford, you're next.
Yeah, kia ora. Just a quick kind of clarity question around the on-demand transport investigation. So what's the timeline for that, and how will it be determined whether it could be an appropriate service option? Like what are the different checks? And specifically the timeline, most interested in that because ASAP would be great.
Yeah, so the on-demand, so again, we dived in and did this through our own budgets as Greater Wellington without support from Waka Kotahi in Tawa as a trial, and that's gone really well over the last 12 months, and so we're making a decision, I think in the next week, maybe next week, about whether to extend that or what to do with that trial in Tawa. 22nd, so a week on Thursday. And so that'll be the sort of first step in figuring out how we approach that particular trial. In terms of having further on-demand public transport services elsewhere in the region, that relies on the new what's called the Sustainable Public Transport Framework, which is the replacement government regulation for tendering contracts and operating public transport. It replaces the public transport operating model. So that is going through Parliament at the moment. New law will arrive, and that law we expect, as it's currently drafted, will allow for the Waka Kotahi funding assistance that we get for all the rest of our public transport to apply also to PT on demand. So at the moment, it's only scheduled, timetabled services that can receive that 50% funding, which is totally crucial to operating our network. But once we get that in place, it will open up significantly more potential for on-demand services to be provided. But have to temper that with, again, like every part of our network, everybody wants a bus service to exactly where they want to go. Everybody wants on-demand now, and everybody wants a bus shelter. So there is, and we simply don't have the time, money, capability to do all of that all at once. So there is a prioritisation process that will have to be gone through. So yeah, but looking good for more of that, and yeah. The sustainable public transport framework will be in place in the coming months, I would say. So pre-election, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, is that questions?
Michael Moore has got one.
Good
Community
day,
board.
kia ora. Good to meet you, Thomas, after we've been email buddies for a while. I'm from Te Horo as well, as Councillor Coe is, and of course there's an elevation of real interest and concern of this. It's not a recent elevation of interest either. It predates Jared Schwartz's advocating to you over the last 4 months with official information requests, etc. And Colin Davis had been pursuing this for at least 4 years or so under Councillor James Cootes around the same table. One of the recent concerns is not only that the 290's ignoring and not stopping anywhere between the Waikanai New World Supermarket and the Otaki New World Supermarket, 13 kilometres, but now it's in fact diverting the old state highway entirely in most part and going on the expressway. Now I hear mixed suggestions about this, that buses shouldn't be using motorways or expressways, so I'd like clarification on that, on safety reasons I'm told. I don't know if that's true or not, because there's discussions about a Waikanai beach service which is requested to go to Coastlands, which is using expressway or was. So there's that, and the other thing which has already been reiterated about a hail and ride or an on-demand. And hail and ride would work really well in the rural community. It doesn't require expensive infrastructural maintenance, and you know the population isn't enormous through there. So looping into Te Horo Beach and Peka Peka doesn't bring much cost implications at all, of course. The school bus goes into Te Horo Beach, it loops around Dixie Street and does a loop out Gawler and back out, not Gawler, Rodney and back out the beach road. So the reason that bus stop was removed, of course, in 2015 at the beach road corner was because it couldn't turn around and there was other complications with the owner of the cafe land. So there's a couple of things I just want to share into this conversation, and really is a heightened need in that rural community. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we'll go away, the three of us, and come back with some considered comms. And I agree. The worst thing is when there's a vacuum and no comms. So we'll try to address that at least.
Sure.
Or do we turn it
I
off?
know. Doesn't make any difference for you.
No.
You stay on and we'll just get you up the queue, Penny.
The green is on the
Here
queue.
we go.
Thank
You're
you.
on the queue.
Just wanted to add to what people won't be aware of is that in that terms of the on-demand opportunities for the Kapiti Coast, another suggestion I've been putting into our staff for consideration based on some community representation that came to me was that an on-demand service between Waikanai Beach and Paraparumu. So rather than going up, the shorter version. So just to say that that's kind of in the mix and in the thinking. And then actually, off the top of my head, it makes me think that actually maybe that when we're doing our upcoming Kapiti Coast bus route review, which will be kicking off soon, that, you know, almost is there like fresh fields thinking opportunity around, is that more of a circular kind of route anyway? So just, you know, there's lots of thinking around there, and that's another potential on demand one that I've been pitching anyway. Thanks.
Buses allowed to use expressways? Okay.
Yeah.
There's confusion, that's all.
You mean the state highway network?
Thank you.
Yeah, yes, they do. I mean, we'd have the one that goes on the state highway one, Along Gorge.
So this Te Horo one's had a change in route. That's what I'm saying, without any advice, and that's the mitigating point in this discussion. It now does not go along where it used to on your maps, and you look on your maps, and it's going a different way. And there's no people that I know of that live on an expressway. Is my point.
Yeah.
And the residents' point.
Yeah. Got those points.
All right. Great. We've got lights everywhere, so there's lots of questions coming. So what I want to just encourage us is please don't ask a question or add points to something that's already been raised. Okay, let's target something that hasn't been talked about yet. Okay, so is anyone going to turn their lights off?
Well, apologies,
No.
but I do want to say something that's already been spoken about. because
Okay,
I'm
so the
quite
answer's
hot on
coming
it. Well,
because it'll be related to what Bernie's raised.
yes, it is, but
Okay,
it's
so
just,
let's just leave that. They're going to provide some answers to Bernie, and we can ask that those answers
well, I wanted to
get
support
sent.
Bernie because people don't use buses because there are no shelters.
Okay, thank you. Michelle. You just got yourself.
Response, is it the same policy for bus shelters across the region, or is there a regional and urban differential?
It is the same policy across the region.
If you just leave it on if you've got follow-up stuff, otherwise you drop out of the queue and then...
I'll turn mine on.
That's right, there's a whole bunch of people.
Maybe be considered then, please.
So a change of policy for what? Regional versus urban?
And rural.
And
we
rural.
are always going to have low bus numbers at many of our stops.
Sure, okay.
And in urban and rural, if you look at the urban environment in the Wellington area, there are considerable more places where you could shelter close to a bus stop. But in many of our areas, we don't have overhangs. We just got, there is no infrastructure around where they could stand as an alternative. So
Okay.
I think that needs to be incorporated.
So just adding
Got
the
that
rural
point.
concept, great.
Yep, got that point.
Thank you. Rob?
Oh, thanks,
Councillor Rob.
thanks, Florence. Fiona and Thomas, thanks for coming, and yeah, really good report. I'm a resident of Old Taki and use the train regularly. We drive down to Waikanai, as you probably know, and then we get the train into Wellington. Several occasions I've gone to the station at Paraparamu to get the train to Waikanai and then a connecting bus to Old Taki. And there's been about 20 people waiting at the station, and they insist that the train is running, and the train is in fact not running. There's a bus replacement. Just if you could give us a bit more, communications there, just day-to-day comms, just simple ones, saying, look, go over to the bus shelter, the bus will go through, and the right bus shelter too. If you go to the wrong one, the bus will go right past you, even if you stand in front of it. The other one too is when you do get to Waikanai in the train, the bus connection to Old Taki leaves when the train arrives. And you have to wait 40 minutes for the next bus. So just a bit of coordination there, just make the bus wait for the passengers to get off and get in because I'm sure the bus leaves empty. And just a question, are we going to have loos put in the trains like you get in Europe and everywhere else? Thanks.
Good questions. And just to say, just an overarching point, I think we all accept we would like the public transport system to be better in Wellington. We think it's pretty good in a lot of areas, but there's a lot of areas where it could be better. So rest assured, Penny and I and our colleagues spend a lot of time doing the kind of interrogation that you're doing to our officers, and it is frustrating, of course. So I just want to put that out there that we're not coming to you saying, "Hey, here's our brilliant transport system. I hope you all love it." We're in many ways as frustrated as I can sort of sense some of you might be at the areas where we could improve the public transport system. So just a broader orientation point. Day-to-day comms around bus replacing train, that is a frustration, definitely. And I think we know we can do better on that, and we're working on it. Making sure buses wait for trains, integrating those services, again, definitely agree with that, and we'll follow up on that. Toilets on the trains. Fiona is an expert on toilets on trains. Fiona knows more about toilets than I think you ever thought you were going to.
I know more about toilets than I've really wanted to know, to be honest. Yes, look, wharipaku are obviously a consideration, and the Matangi fleet that is up to Waikato will not be retrofitted to include wharipaku. We have an opportunity to look at this, obviously, when we're procuring our new trains for the Wellington to Palmerston North route, so we'll have a look at that. Obviously, with wharipaku, they do take up passenger space and space for other things, so those are things in consideration. So, yeah.
Well, thanks. Yeah.
Capital Connection does,
Yes.
So it's a 2-hour journey, so
yeah.
And we have them on the Wairarapa as well, so
Fiona,
it's a time thing.
The time is an hour, is it,
Yes.
that you must have a...
Yes.
Over 60 minutes, yeah.
Like the old steam engine days, you stopped at the stations, didn't you? Had a big cup of tea and then...
I don't recall the steam engine days.
So, I do actually. 1950s, they used to have the goods trains come through the Kandala line with the
Great,
steam
Rob.
engines. But
Got
anyway,
a question, another question?
Yeah, no, another. But don't get me wrong, the trains are really good, really reliable compared to the ones in the 60s and 70s, and the buses are equally really great, very reliable and very comfortable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Fiona, Thomas. Look, I live in Otaki, and we seem to be straddling in a blind spot. We don't have train. We'd have little less degradation of service going north to live in. We've got a lot of health services and police and justice services, which our residents need to get to. Also, off the back of some of the comments that Mike Moore's constituents raised to him, came a potential idea. If we had a dedicated bus service between Levin and Waikanai, which goes via Pekapeka and Te Horo, then we could actually have a pseudo train service all the way through to Levin. And then we can actually have a dedicated bus service at 290 can be rerouted just solely to actually service Otaki itself. And those dedicated service between Levin and Waikanai would coincide with train timetable as well. And this to me would seem like a very simple solution we can get implemented very soon without the requirement of hundreds of millions for trains or electrification. What's your view on that, and how can we progress this thought?
So at the moment, interregional public transport is extremely complicated to put in place because of the legislation. That is something we have advocated strongly as Greater Wellington to the government in the consideration of the legislation that's going through, as I mentioned earlier, for the Sustainable Public Transport Framework, to change that. We've argued that there shouldn't be any barriers to the development of interregional public transport services if the two public transport authorities want them to exist, or two or more. So if this new legislation goes through and we're successful in convincing the government to change that legislation to remove the barriers to interregional public transport services, and Horizons Regional Council and Greater Wellington Regional Council both agreed that we wanted to have some form of interregional public transport that did, a Palmerston North to Waikanai or a Levin to Waikanai bus service, then that could be taken forward. And we would have to have some discussions about whether that's the best thing to do, and that would be a whole process. But it is not impossible, and we are looking at it, and there are some tentative discussions between Horizons and us about that sort of thing. Horizons are keen.
Right. What does this council need to do to assist with that process?
Good question. I mean, I think if you were to, I don't know, if you were to say that is something that you want as a council and write to us about that, then I'm sure that will be welcome and helpful for that idea.
And maybe copy to the Ministry of Transport.
Yeah.
So I was thinking that's a central government issue, isn't it, with this legislation that's currently going through? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the ministry oversees that policy and that legislation. Yes.
Okay.
Is that come out to the second reading, because we've submitted it?
We submitted to select committee, so yeah, and we made that point very strongly, and the select committee picked it up. So I think I'm hopeful that they change it, but I don't know what they're going to do.
Are we still within time frame for submissions from us?
No.
I would suggest second reading, no. That's.
But you could write to the you could write to the MOT.
Okay, Mr. Chair, could I propose we write a letter to central government and support of the Wellington Regional Council as well, please?
We can send you our submission if you like.
Thank you. That'd be great.
We'll do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Noted, Simon. Thank you. Bede.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm based in Raumati, and there are very few negatives to an existence in Raumati, but one of them is catching buses and trains. It's been some years, I have to admit, but one of the frustrations I still hear on Facebook is that buses seem to be timetabled to miss the connecting train. Similar to what Rob expressed about the bus leaving before people can get off the train. The last time it happened to me, I was with a Norwegian homestay student who told me that that was normal, to turn up 5 minutes after the train had left. And it seems to be timetabled like that way at times. So again, just that calibration, can we get that sorted, please, for Raumati? Thank you.
Yeah.
And in the spirit of honesty, I'd say that is singularly the most, and across our whole district, that is like, while we don't never have use the bus cancelling services because the bus, that is the connection that's the stuff I hear singularly the most about is the problem. Totally. Yeah. Which is, they're well aware of it, believe you me, but yeah.
Very frustrating.
Keep the examples coming in, because it's really useful, because we think we give that feedback, we think it's fixed, and then we get another example. Yeah.
Okay, I've got two others, both of whom have had a chance already at asking some questions with Councillor Bravanov and Councillor Wilson. So can we go on with the presentation? Just keep a note of your question and we'll bring that up right at the end so that the presentation we can get through the slides, then we can finish the questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So in respect of infrastructure updates, it was quite nice to get off the train this morning and see the Paraparaumu Transport Hub progressing. So we're working with KCDC on delivering the new transport hub. Detailed design is completed on the living roof shelters, and so the building consent is being lodged with the foundation works, and they're commencing soon. We're having off-site fabrication of the shelters is underway, and customer wayfinding is currently being designed. Bus stop improvements, bus stops on Arafota Road, Naya Road, Parata Street, Ngā Portiki Street, Guildford Drive have been publicly consulted and are ready for approval by local community boards. So that kind of goes to what you were saying, Penny. With respect to bus stop improvements, Route 250 bus stops have been marked and completed, and we're now investigating Route 264 bus stops. Raumati Shops bus stop, we've worked again with KCDC on this, and the Raumati community is to find a solution to some issues identified by local businesses there. A new shelter is being installed this week, with the old shelter going to the Otaki College bus stop. The real-time info screen will be moved to the new location in the coming months. The old State Highway 1 revocation and new route, 290 bus stops. So new bus stops are planned on the old State Highway 1 near Pekapeka, Te Horo and Otaki, near Sue Ave, and we've been working with Waka Kotahi to include civil infrastructure and pedestrian access improvements into the overall design. Keep talking? Mm-hmm. Okay, so rail infrastructure, strengthening and internal and external refurbishment of Paraparaumu northbound station.
Can we go next slide?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm doing it on my computer.
No, it's all good. I'll
all linked in if you can do that. That would be great. Yeah. Sorry. I got half my notes. So yeah, we've got strengthening of the Paraparaumu northbound station building, and we're considering installing changing places facilities in partnership with KCDC on that one. Planning to undergo further subway cosmetic upgrades in 2024. Recent introduction of Snapper on rail. We have now no longer occupied the ticket offices, and additional security and automation has been introduced into the internal waiting areas. That was specifically to enable increased opening hours of the internal waiting room and toilets. We have still got ongoing vandalism issues with a group of youths at Paraparaumu and Waikanai stations. Yeah, that CCTV would bear that out. Yes, probably about 5 of them, I would say. Yeah, it's proving to be quite a difficult one. Okay.
Anything on rail infrastructure? No, keep going. Oh. Okay, leave it to last.
Just go through and we'll come to questions at the end. Let's get through the...
Okay, how many questions have we got?
There's currently 3 lights on in that space.
Probably should.
Just keep going.
Yeah, okay. So update on fares. We have, from the 1st of April, confirmed implementation of some fare initiatives, increase of 6% to cover, not quite cover CPI, increasing off-peak discount and applying the 50% off-peak discount to adult Snapper fares and all concessions on Snapper.
Just on the, it's significantly less than CPI over the period of that we haven't increased fares. So I think CPI over the period where we are talking about increasing fares, I think was something like 16%, 14%, and our increase is 6%. So we're tracking significantly below inflation on fares. But
yep. And of course, the particular relevance, we've got the Community Connect. So this is the fully funded Community Connect scheme, and that should hopefully improve affordability for community services card holders from 1 July.
And actually, it'd be really... Oh yeah, so we can, shall we talk about the budget? We should talk about the budget. But just, I'll talk about yeah, it's pretty complicated actually. But the, just on the Community Connect service, so one thing that we've been encouraging, because we've been doing these talks to the other councils around the region, and we've been encouraging people to talk to your communities and people you know who may have a community services card or who may be eligible for one, to go and register it, because there's a portal online now. So if you go to the portal, and we can send you all of that, you just put in your name and your MSD client number, and then you put in your Snapper card number, and then it just registers. And so then from the 1st of July, you snap on to a train or a bus, and it automatically knows that you're a community services card holder and gives you half price. But it's really important that people register online their Snapper, and we do realise that's quite a big barrier for a lot of people. We've got I think the 11 MSD offices around the region. There are places where people can do that just in person, and you can also pick up a free Snapper card at those walk-ins. And so we're doing everything we can. We're doing targeted outreach, but we do need help, and we realise that it's actually quite a task to get everybody to register their community services cards. So that's one thing to say about that. Really would appreciate your help on that in this area.
Can I suggest that we get some of that information through to our comms team here at council, so it can go out in our Everything Kapiti newsletter, etc., because that is a pretty important
It's a big
piece of support that we can give our community.
How often does that newsletter go out?
Weekly.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'll follow up on that. And then just on the budget stuff, so yeah, you may have seen that in the budget last month, the government said that it would fund half-price public transport from the 1st of July for under 25s and free public transport for under 13s. And so we're just working out how to implement this, and it is, I wish it was simple, but it isn't, because there's no nationwide age verification system that is just simple to plug into our Snapper card. And you know, with the Ministry of Social Development portal that I just mentioned for the community services card, to match up community services card with Snapper, that took about 8 months to design and build. So we are very much hoping that we don't have to do something like that straight away. We are working on some solutions, and we are hoping that they will be ready a few weeks after the 1st of July, but we won't be able to do, I'm sorry, but we won't be able to do those fair policies from the government on the 1st of August, so on the 1st of July, which is disappointing, very disappointing. But it is just a constraint that we face with our technology, with our ticketing system, and with the time available to make those changes. So we'll just have to wear that, and we're working very hard to be able to implement them as soon as possible after the 1st of July, and we're hoping that it'll be a case of a few weeks after. And then we are also working with the government to make sure that they put in place or facilitate a nationwide age verification portal that can be linked to transport cards, because every public transport authority around the country is going to require that in order to implement this policy properly. And that would have been good to have had that in advance of the policy being announced and delivered, but the world is not perfect that we live in. So we're working on that, and that's what I can say about that.
Okay.
Okay.
Was that okay, Fiona?
Perfect. Nice.
All right. Do you want to take questions? How many more slides have you got?
There is maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Some really important ones.
Oh yeah, this one. Okay. We'll get
Okay, let's get through these slides.
Okay. We'll skip over some of them. So, just obviously, as you will also be aware, at KCDC, we've got our long-term plan, NLTP, our regional public transport plan, and the regional land transport plan process coming up. So we're going to be going full into that, and we'll need to identify the key changes and additions to investments we want to make over the next 10 years to feed into these documents. So it's a good time to be starting this process and having this conversation.
Talked about that.
Yep. So this is the sustainable public transport model we talked about, and that's going to be quite a game changer, and that amendment bill's going through at the moment. So in terms, yep. So this slide is self-explanatory. Sorry, I'm just trying to now get through.
Go for it.
So yep, so this is just in respect of, just a reminder, regional public transport plan. We are going to be working with councils on what that looks like going forward. Next slide.
Chance for people to input.
Yes. And so that just gives you a little bit more in terms of the Kapiti input to that. We are adopting a collaborative approach. I mean, we always have, but we're really amping that up. So our focus will be current and future network, in particular looking at how we manage and how we respond to the proposed growth in the region. And those are the initiatives that we would look to include. Next.
Fantastic.
Fiona's favourite slide.
Yes, so this is, we get to go shopping and we get to buy. So this is our new carriages. So this relates to both the Wairarapa and the Manawatu line. With respect to we've got $838 million from Crown to be able to procure new trains. I can see that Penny's really excited about this too. So this isn't just trains, this is actually associated infrastructure. We're starting to stand up this project team now. The proposal is for, the driving force behind this is to replace end-of-life carriages, but also to enable us to do something a bit more special with the connectivity up the Kapiti coast with our rail network. So you can see from this slide here, proposing to increase the frequency of trains being a really good start through here, in the hope that that will actually help us drive mode shift and reduce the number of private vehicles off the road.
Fantastic.
Yep.
I'm just going to say this is a huge thing for us, and also acknowledgement to our staff who put in with great love and commitment, I have to say, for the benefit of the Wairarapa, but for the benefit, especially here in the Kapiti Coast, to that business case that we finally got across the line this year. Thank you. But also that we have skin in the game financially. $70 million was our commitment to long-term plans ago, and that was, you know, the offer on the table that we just didn't go to government to say, come on, we want all you, you know, we won't, we're not prepared to front up, you know, we want your money. We're putting into the kitty ourselves by $70 million for our community. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, it's going to be and Horizons as well. So it's an interregional service. So it's required a lot of collaboration with Horizons. It will require a significant amount of work across the region and with respect to partnering with iwi, because the Otaki and Levin railway stations are also in the land bank. So there's a significant amount of mahi we're going to have to do to bring this across the line. But everyone's very excited, and it should be a game changer for the Kapiti Coast.
Can I? Yeah, well, I was just suggesting that if they've funded this, then they have to put the legislation in behind to allow the interregional public transport stuff.
Well, they have to allow the interregional. They don't necessarily have to legislate to make it easier. So
okay, so we're trying to get the easier bit as well as the, okay.
It's an opt-in, I guess you could call it.
We want to make it. Yeah. We want to make it a default position that interregional services attract the same funding as within regional services. At the moment, it's a very complicated, convoluted process to go through to get interregional services funded in the same way. So it would be super helpful if we could make that change, and we think it should be made.
Great.
Okay. Yep. National ticketing. Just quickly. The program is gathering momentum. Waka Kotahi is working closely with all PTAs. ECAN's going to be the first one to roll out. And I just want to point out too that all of these issues around our constraints in putting in place some of these fares, integrated ticketing solutions between bus and rail, all of those will be heavily ameliorated through the national ticketing system. So
this basically means you will have one account across the country, and that will allow you to take public transport anywhere around the country at any time, and you could just use your FPOS card. It'll just be, you'll have an account linked to you, and it will be massively much more convenient.
Yep, so we're looking at modernising this around 2027, we're hoping.
Fantastic. One more. Is it?
That's it.
That's it?
That's it, yeah.
Great, thank you. We'll jump into the questions. Councillor Wilson, followed by Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you very much for the presentation there. It's good to see some focus back on public transport. We've been very good at building roads. In fact, they're so keen on building roads, they've built the same one about 5 times here, and Transmission Gully's catching up as well. So money spent on public transport is always a good idea. I was always an advocate for free public transport. I'd like to think that there's still some voices at the Regional Council that might be talking that up, continuing to talk that up. Just another observation, the Penny, you mentioned about looking at a bus service directly from Waikanai Beach to Paraparumu. I think it's, I would hope you would take some caution in that. You have to ask yourself, so why would you do that? And if that's to get people from Waikanai Beach to Coastlands Shopping Centre, there's a Waikanai Business Association who would probably suggest that that's not a good idea, that in fact there are Waikanai businesses who need those. So better public transport link between Waikanai Beach and Waikanai Town might be worth having a think about. I just would quickly like to say that the public transport system in Wellington is world class. It's certainly the best in the country, I think, in Greater Wellington. And we lose sight of that fact sometimes because we haven't got enough bus shelter and we haven't got enough stuff. These are first world things. If you go around the rest of the country and have a look at the public transport system, our system is fantastic. So I wouldn't like anybody to think I'm being too negative. But there are bits that clearly we are missing out on. I really would like to see a conversation between Greater Wellington and Horizons. Sam Ferguson's the PT chair up there. Sam is completely on board with making sure that there are good linkages, and at the moment, as you've heard from our Te Horo people, There are parts of our district that are being neglected badly, and so I would like to see that addressed. And the last bit for me is that 13 years ago we got the electrification of the rail through to Waikanae, and everybody went, wow, that's fantastic. And it's 13 years ago, just in case anyone didn't, it's 13, and nothing has happened in terms of getting that through to Otaki since. So there's been lots of promises and lots of talk and almost no action. So, and I know there's plans for the future, but people have been asking about this for a long, long time. So just again, raising that flag. But other than that, well done.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Pravanov, do you want to respond to that?
I was just going to say that part of the stuff that makes the bus network wonderful in the Wellington region is our move to electrification. Very, very proud of the stuff we do there. But just the point, Nigel, on the electrification, these new trains make that redundant. We don't need extra wiring. That's the whole point of it, so that actually we don't just then have a new train service to Otaki, which will be wonderful, but actually that means we can have a train service for the future to Levin and to Shannon and to Palmerston North and to Featherston and to Carterton and Greytown and Masterton. If we stuck to the wire thinking, none of that would be possible. So this is, like I say, it makes wires redundant, that the trains will be self-contained essentially. Thank you.
Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, through the chair. I have 3 questions. My first one relates to 2 of the slides that you had, and I think the earlier one talked about a bus service to Peka Peka Beach and to Te Horo Beach. And then in a later slide, you talked about the bus stops being by the old state highway at Peka Peka and Te Horo. Can you clarify whether you actually mean going down to the beach or whether you are referring to the old state highway, please?
Can I come back to you on that, please? I'd like to get a.
Yes.
I think it would be quite useful, given that you've asked for that comms and clarity. I think it would be quite useful to give you the whole picture.
Thank you, thank you. So, I should say that I'm the Waikanae Ward Councillor and one of the Waikanae Ward Councillors, and so this area is in Councillor Wilson's area as well, south of Te Horo Beach Road. My other question relates to some of the conversations that related to bus shelters. What is the story about school bus shelters? Do they come under the same criteria or are they different? Because I know that there are issues with a bus shelter at Te Horo.
Yeah, look, they come under the same criteria, school bus shelters, because it's still the same patronage. So a bus shelter is a bus shelter at this point. Look, we're aware we get a lot of people asking for bus shelters specifically for kids for the same reason that you're asking for them. And it is a really tricky thing. If we were to go to community-based decision-making, I'm not sure how equitable that would be either. So we just have to look at those things, I think.
So I think it would be good if we could have a conversation offline about a specific one, just to hear your views on it.
There is a bus shelter at Te Horo Beach, but it's put up by the community, and there are issues in terms of maintenance and liability in case it falls off.
Yeah, no, I get that, yeah.
This is exactly the one I'm referring to.
Yeah.
Thank you. So my third question is, so I hear from Councillor Gaylor that they are looking at a bus route between Waikanae and Paparamou, and I agree that something like that is actually really beneficial, because currently it can take up to an hour and a half to go from Waikanae Beach to Paparamou, and if you want to encourage people to use public transport, then you've got to make it as effective and efficient as possible. And I'm the one who actually asked the question about potentially that route, and I remember sitting around this council table and was told quite clearly that buses did not go on the expressway, so I'm actually very pleased to hear that that is not the case. But my question is, can you clarify within your own organisation that you are all on the same page in relation to that, please. So Mr. Mellon who spoke from, we had a briefing from, I think it was a double presentation.
Not sure who made that reference. I guess
Yeah.
legally, there may be a difference between what you're legally allowed to do in terms of any vehicle potentially can travel on the state highway network, and a policy position possibly in terms of, obviously there's no stops on the expressway, so but I'm not aware of any limitation in terms of vehicles that can travel and use the state highway network other than cyclists potentially on the expressway if it's defined as a motorway. So buses.
We do have.
Yeah.
So there may be a difference between a preference around accessibility, because obviously if you're going to be stopping and picking up passengers, there's an issue there. But I'm not aware of anything that would stop them.
Yeah, so the reason this was raised is that the bus between Otaki and I think it was Waikanae used to travel down the old state highway, and that road was closed for a period of time because of works. And so then the bus went on the expressway, so obviously it was allowed to go onto the expressway, but it has not reverted back to the proper route that it is planned to go on.
Which is something that was raised by Liz and Mike earlier, so we'll follow that up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I suspect it's tied up with the whole revocation space in the building. We just need to be clear.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Warwick.
Who?
Oh, Bernie, sorry.
Don't forget me.
No, I won't forget you. Could never forget you.
Three, Thomas and Fiona, just brief answers. Are you contributing any money to the development of the Paraparaumu station project? The regional council contributing any money to?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes was the answer.
Okay. Secondly, the toilets, again. There is a toilet. The toilet is not open on a Sunday, right? And the toilet is on one side of the railway line, if you like, if you're familiar with it. And is there a proposal to install to make the toilets open over the weekend, and providing a new toilet for this side of the railway station?
I'll answer your last question first.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
On terms of supplying a new toilet, the answer is no. We're not planning on installing an extra toilet at Paraparaumu.
But it'll be open over the weekend.
So no, I haven't answered that question yet.
Oh.
I don't know. I know that our opening hours and toilets do relate to public transport hours at this point, and so we are experiencing a huge amount of vandalism and unsociable behaviour with respect to our ticketing offices and our toilets when they are open and not supervised.
Okay. Well,
so this is it's a case by case basis, and we've had we're going through a bit of an experimental phase since we've closed the ticketing offices, obviously too, with this.
Yeah.
So maybe. They, for some reason, wharipaku do tend to attract quite a lot of vandalism.
So Sean is just going to add something to that as well.
Oh, okay, go.
Yeah, just the Paraparaumu station was mentioned in one of the slides. That there's significant issues there with bad behaviour, seriously bad behaviour in terms of some of the issues that are occurring over there. And we're working with Greater Wellington on that at the moment. I think there's a meeting proposed, a follow-up meeting. There was a meeting with police, the mayor, and there's another meeting proposed, I think, to see what can be done there to try and improve things. And the toilet at the station, though, there is a plan to upgrade that significantly from what's there at the moment. We're working on that at the moment with Greater Wellington Regional Council. There's also work being done to upgrade the building and the ticketing office itself as well. And I don't know whether that would make it any easier in terms of after-hours access, but it won't deal with, like I said, there are some serious issues over there in terms of behaviour that we're dealing with at the moment.
Yeah, my last question, is regarding the subway. We were told that the subway would continue to remain open once the hub is completed. In the meantime, because there's a pedestrian crossing now, crossing the road. So can Sean maybe give us a guarantee that the subway will remain open?
So you're
without,
talking about two, so there's obviously the connecting link between, I guess, the east and west connections for the platforms that sits with Greater Wellington. Then there's the extended subway that runs to the west under the road. So yes, those, well, certainly the highway subway is going to continue to be open, and we've just spent some funds upgrading that. And as far as I'm aware, there's no plans to do anything or close anything with regard to the ongoing connection to the east.
Excellent. Councillor Warwick, we get to you.
So my question is around rural bus shelters, because unfortunately we seem to have a gold standard for certain things that cost a lot of money. So how could you work with the communities who want bus shelters on something that's a little less cost and more rural looking, like the bus shelters that are put around for kids, usually by the community in rural communities, and whether there's a will for that from the community boards? It would be good to work with the community to ask what, because you just need shelter. Maybe not the very expensive shelter. You know, it could be poles and just a plain roof. I mean, maybe that's all we need, rather than a big flash Wellington City look shelter at Otaki Beach or Te Horo Beach. We don't need that, maybe. The other thing is the Otaki railway station. So I know that I've talked with Penny about this, and staff have talked to your staff, but recently we have had a lot of vandalism. We have a relationship, the community board, with our Nahapu Otaki, and I know they're willing to see things happen there. And can we move that up the list a bit? Because at the moment it's very regular. It's getting worse, and it's going to end up a place to sleep. But also from the expressway, we really look a bit shabby, because that is what you see with the big Otaki on it, and it's terrible. So how can we move that up? How can you work with us and iwi to move that up the list? And also with regard to the there doesn't seem to be a lot of lighting when people are disembarking in the car park, and is there CCTV cameras there that will catch people who are vandalising it? It's just, our community would like to see that, I think, moved up the list.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate. I mean, we do, and we're really looking forward to getting stuck into the Otaki station. It is owned by Linz currently, so any repair work, any vandalism work, we have to go through Linz. It is not owned by Greater Wellington, and it's in the land bank, obviously. So we are kicking off that work with iwi to look at what can be done with Otaki. Penny, did you?
Yep.
I was on the phone with Darren Ponta last night, actually, ahead of this, and he was saying that coming up shortly we'll be organising, possibly on Teams, and available to all the elected representatives here and with Horizons, to actually talk through the detail of the rail investment. And so things like what will be happening with the railway station, all that kind of part, that's not just the new trains, but that's also the kind of rail and infrastructure part of that investment. We'll have a big kind of meeting that it just might be more user friendly for everybody here if we do that on Teams. So we're just working through that, but that'll be coming up.
Yep. So, but our intention will be, the end game is to obviously have that as a modern, accessible, secure, beautiful station.
Yeah.
That's our aspiration for it, for sure.
Just so you know, please involve us, because we can help you. Like, the community board is very much on board.
Yeah.
I know our staff are, and I know Hapu are as well. You know, the community wants to see that building restored and looking and being functional, actually.
It's absolutely our intention, and in fact we can't do it without you, so that's fully the intention, please rest assured.
I was just talking to the chair about the ownership issue in terms of the car parking there. So council leased that site, but ongoing use of it and future security of the car parking in conjunction with the station is obviously a a key to demand issues there. So that will be a key part of that conversation with Greater Wellington in terms of that ownership model and where it sits long term. Because without that car park, then there's some significant issues there in terms of access to the new trains.
And on the on the idea of bus shelters in rural communities, we can come back to you on that. We'll have a conversation on the train on the way back to Wellington, and we'll see where we get to. Because we have recently heard from some other communities who have asked us exactly the same thing. Can we work with you to put together something? Yeah, there's some challenges, but hopefully we can find some solutions.
Okay, thank you. Our last question from Councillor Coe.
Thank you. It's just a question of Mr. Mellon, actually. So transport's obviously a really key issue for us going forward, and particularly for our young people. And I just wonder what's planned in terms of ongoing input from elected members into the discussions you're having with Greater Wellington and so on, in terms of like firstly the revised timetabling, which is a revision which is about to happen, but also the long-term planning input. Presumably you're developing submissions and working with at an operational level. When will we have an opportunity as elected members to input into that process?
Yeah, so the RLTP, there was a slide up there with as many acronyms as you could fit on the page. That process is just starting. So yes, absolutely, we will be coming back to the councillors, and we might look at a workshop to have some input into. So there's a technical advisory group that feeds into that process that is at a staff officers level, but there are also workshops that are linked to the Regional Transport Committee, and that feeds into that process as well. And so certainly we can brief you and we can look at a workshop here.
Yeah, that'd be good.
But it also would be useful maybe to come, if some elements of that might be able to come here from a Greater Wellington perspective to actually present that back to council. I don't think, certainly the Regional Transport Committee, when we get to the submission stage, having some of that interaction locally might be useful, but I'd say it would be a shared focus with some of the stuff happening here, but would absolutely invite Greater Wellington to maybe come out and have more conversations at a governance level around some of that stuff.
Yeah, because as you can see, there's huge interest around the table.
It's really great.
This is something we really do want to engage with you on, and so we would welcome more, ongoing opportunities to be involved.
And sort of some of those workshops, particularly like around the specifics of the route review.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm wondering whether we need a little, subcommittee of elected members or something to feed into that process, or, the ones who have a particular interest.
So I imagine all the community boards are just going to engage on that.
So what there's high interest across all our elected members, so I'll just tautoko what Councillor Coe was saying, because that was going to be my question on and I guess the invitation to continue to workshop, particularly in this process where you're just mentioning there's 4 strategic things that are coming up. We really want to have a say into those, and pretty strongly, but also the just the practicals of how it works out, and us having room to be able to workshop that with staff. I think across all of our district would be really valued from us all. So I guess that's the encouragement from us as elected members for regional council staff and KCDC staff get together, create some spaces for us to be able to input into that. Yeah.
We do have a really strong working relationship at the staff level. So what would be useful, I think, would be share those timetables, because there are so many overlaps between the RLTP, the LTP, everything else that's going on, to give you a sense of when we might be able to best fit some of that stuff in as a starting point. So happy.
That'd be great, because I think there's there is, as Liz said, a lot of interest, and our responses to climate change often revolve around public transport and how we can up that game. Do you have something to add? One thing, Cam, we're already way over time.
I realise that. Just one real quick comment. KCDC has been in communication with Linz about the car park lighting at Otaki, and the forward and back got shorter and shorter and terser, and basically Linz just in the end basically said do it yourself to KCDC, and that was the response, that if we want better car park lighting, we've got to do it ourselves. They won't do it.
They're not interested in investing in that
They're just
station at this
holding-
point with
holding land.
where it sits.
Yep,
So,
cool. That will-
yeah, the sooner you're right, the sooner we can actually start kicking this conversation off, the better. We agree.
Fantastic.
Well, yeah, we've got live-in as well. So there's a huge number of strands to this project. It's not just the carriages; it's all of the infrastructure. It's the above and below rails. So there's a lot of conversations to be had. We're standing up the project team now. We'll be going out for a project director hopefully within the next 6 weeks. Once we've got that online, we can actually start properly timetabling some of this stuff.
Yeah, and the live-in work is underway at the moment. I was there a couple of weeks ago, and it actually gives a good example of what will need to happen at the Otaki train station in terms of the actual quality of surface of platform and all that sort of thing.
Fantastic. All right, I think we're done. Thank you so much for coming out and enduring our questions and stuff. It's been really informative, and I'm sure we're all going to read through the actual presentation and look at the detail. And if we have further questions, you'll probably get a barrage of emails coming through in that space.
And if you could just keep an eye out for that meeting invite for that one I talked about for the
Teams
regional
meeting.
rail would be good.
Okay. A transport committee. So thank you again for coming out, and thank you elected members for being here and your involvement this morning. We're 23 minutes after schedule. Thank you for staff who are waiting for our next briefing.